beauty of this podcast of Life is Better with You in it. If you've been following along, thank you. We are coming up to one of our final episodes. And listeners, you are in for such a treat today because I brought on Jessica Otto, the owner of Florida Kids Therapy Services. And I think you're just going to really enjoy this conversation. So if you're a parent, listen in. If you're a grown-up, listen in. If you are a female business owner, this conversation is going to be for you too. So Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
It's awesome. And so I want to kind of give listeners at least kind of a general idea of who you are. So we're going to talk about a couple things today. So we'll talk about who you are and a little bit about your business. We'll talk about probably why your business is set apart. Because as you know, we've been partnering together and working together in recruiting. We'll talk a little bit about what it's like to be a female business owner and things that we've kind of taken away from these conversations so far. And we'll just talk about how you are something else when you are with your students and when you are with your SLPs, because you are a owner operator. So tell us a little bit about you and what your business is.
So I am a speech language pathologist and have been for a lot of years now. I originally in life was planning to be a politician. That was my long-term goal. And
Day after the
then
election, that's a
I
good
know,
combo.
very. I still loved last night. I stayed up late tracking the election and watching
Love
all the
it.
things. It's always fascinating to me.
Mm.
So that was my original goal. And then I was pursuing a major in leadership. And in the middle of that major, took a course working with deaf and hard of hearing 2-year-olds, actually in Virginia, and changed my life, changed my major, changed everything. I was like, this is what I want to do.
Wow.
And at the time, I was already dating my husband, who is a serial entrepreneur. He loves to start and grow businesses, and always has. And my father owned his own business, surrounded by a lot of other business owners. That's been a great part of support. But my husband said at the time, like, whatever you want to do, we'll start a business doing that. And we ended up buying a small private practice. And then Florida Kids actually grew out of the private practice to serve schools. So we serve schools in and around Northeast Florida, which is where I'm from originally. Most of my family is here, and it's wonderful.
Oh, I love that. So walk me through how you serve schools. So do you hire SLPs? Do you hire assistants? And like, how do you support the schools? What does that look like? How do you kind of partner with them?
So we partner with schools really by providing exceptional therapists to serve on their campus. So we provide speech, occupational, and physical therapy, whether that is the highest level certified therapist or an assistant to serve. In a school setting, there is flexibility because it's not a medical setting. So it's
Mm.
not often as intense as a medical setting. And so for me, I think it's an amazing place that assistants can work because it allows them to get experience, become experts in treating articulation and language disorders, specifically for speech, and providing excellent therapy to kids in the school system.
Wow. And so you grew up thinking you were going to be a politician and then took one class and the trajectory of your life totally changed and now you're a business owner. And so what do you think sets your business apart, right? So you've been an owner operator for many years. What do you think sets your business apart and why therapists stay with you? I think, when it comes to hiring, even as our listeners are listening to this, they're either navigating a new job search, they are in a role that they may not like. What do you feel like really sets your company apart to where you retain these amazing therapists? Like, what do you think people want?
So Florida Kids, my goal, so because Florida Kids grew out of a private practice, and because I'm a therapist, my goal was to support therapists well. In
Mm,
everything that we do, I feel like our field, so often you're put in hard positions and you're an island. Like there's no one easily available to you. And so when Florida Kids started, my goal was to create an amazing support network. And so we did that. So we actually, as a company, even though I think right now we have about 25 therapists that serve in Northeast Florida, But for that, we actually employ a supervising therapist that her job is just to support therapists in the field. And that means that her time is devoted to going on site if a therapist needs it, or being available to answer challenging documentation questions, whatever the case may be. It's pretty amazing to get to have that. I know I serve a couple of schools here and I still text her with questions because, paperwork processes will have changed or
Yeah.
we'll have an atypical situation. And it's like, hey, Marlene, I need to know, how do we navigate this situation? And even having somebody to talk through, like I have this teacher who's challenging or the student who's challenging, or a parent is threatening, legal action. What do we do? And being able just to have a conversation about that really changes everything.
It sounds like you have invested in this resource for your team, including you, and you see the value in having this resource and having someone to go to so they're not on an island. I think anymore, like in our country and in companies when you are working remote, it can feel so isolating. And so it seems like you're building this community of speech language therapists that are not on an island, that have support, that have someone who's just a text away. Because I know, like for me, like I want to surround myself with a bunch of people who are smarter than me, because we all have something to offer and I don't know everything. And I feel like that helps me navigate business when I just wake up and go, you're putting your pants on like everyone else. You don't know everything. So go find someone who does know more than you, or is at least a couple steps ahead of you. So I love that. And shameless plug, but you're always looking for amazing speech language therapists. So feel free to contact us direct. We'll leave all of our information at the end of this podcast as well. So that way people can reach out to you directly, or they can phone interview with me first before I send them to you. So
Absolutely.
we'll do a shameless hiring plug for that. But walk me through maybe, what it's like to be a small business owner, right? I think when you are something else, and I write in the book about being something else and chasing new things, we want to do all of the things. We want to have all the things all at once. And as you are a small business owner, you have to decide probably what's most important. So walk us through what that journey's been like being a small business owner, and maybe tips for people who are thinking about starting their own business or thinking about going out on their own with their own specialty.
Mhm. I think so. The challenge I feel like with a small business is that you wear every hat.
Yeah.
When the business starts, it is you. And surrounding yourself with a network of support and people who have walked the road before you. I was telling a friend recently, I have so many people that I can text with a business question and say, hey, I have this question, who have done it for many years and some that are right alongside me. And having some people to support me in that ownership piece has been so big. So
Mm,
I feel like a network of support, if you're getting ready to start a business, is huge. I feel like the biggest need in owning a small business is critical thinking,
mm,
because you have to be able to look at problems differently. To own a small business, you have to be willing to take some amount of risk. Like there's always risk, even if it's
always.
just you spending your time, you're spending your time with no promise of a reward. Whereas if you work for a company, they're going to pay you for your time.
Yes.
Um, so you have to be willing to take a couple of steps in faith and working. And then you have to be willing to critically think about multiple sides of the business and answer hard questions. I know we've run against questions, and figuring out the field of speech pathology is, I feel like, in great upheaval right now, because there's such a shortage, because referrals went up 300%, at least in the pediatric population following COVID. And with
Mm,
that kind of increase, we didn't increase 300% in the programs, producing speech language pathologists. So there's now such a need. So therapists really have the best situation to choose where they want to work and how they want to work and what they want that to look like. But there's such a pressing need that there's so often the feeling of being overworked. Um, and so as an owner, having to navigate that and answer the question of, why didn't somebody take that job with me? Like, what other factors are present? And those are really not fun questions as an owner.
hmm.
Of why not Florida kids? Why not me? What happened here? Um, And then on the other side of being able to pursue things that are really scary and really different, putting bids out there for different things and saying, no, I'm going to try. Like there is a reason to try. We
Yes.
love what we do. Um, and we love supporting therapists well. We think caseload should be small. We think that therapists should be connected to each other.
Mm,
These are big deals. Yes, so I know that's answering multiple things, but I do feel like owning a business, being able to critically think is essential,
mm.
and step outside the business and ask the hard questions.
Yeah. I find a lot of times that there's like always something new that I didn't learn or something that I can like take away from others or like use it in my own business where it's like, oh gosh, I guess I never thought about it that way. So I feel like most of the times it's like I take a problem and then I'm like, okay, wait, there's another side to this. Oh, there's another side. Oh, I didn't see that other side. Because I feel like you could really like turn it around and find five different solutions, but like what will work best for your business may not work best for others too. So, yeah, definitely critical thinking skills. It sounds like finding a network of people who you can text who've been down the road. And I feel like it's finding those people that you can trust and that know that have your best intentions at heart. Because when you are willing to take a couple of risks, which you have to be in order to be a business owner. You have to be willing to risk that time because you never get the time back. And you know, as having kids, I feel like I watch them grow up so fast. I'm like, it's going, the time, it's going so fast. And so finding that network of people that you can trust does mean time is money. And I feel like that's so important. So I want to talk to you about maybe failure in business. So maybe be thinking of that. But I want to back up a second because in speech and working directly in the schools, I know like for me at work, being involved in the schools as a PTA president now, as a volunteer gig and supporting the school that way, what is one thing that listeners can take away from this conversation about how they can maybe support their student in school or
Mhm.
support their student when they're getting these types of speech resources? Like, what is something that maybe you think is common knowledge for everyone that you're like, if all grown-ups could just do this, it would support their kids in their speech language journey or just in school? Tell us
Mhm.
maybe a little insight on that.
So I do feel like the biggest thing that parents and grown-ups, any grown-up around a child can do to support a child's growth is to talk to them directly and ask them direct, pointed questions. Not just how was your day? Because the average child is going to
Good.
go good, and that's the end of the answer.
Yeah.
Or what did you do today? And you get, I
Mhm.
don't know. Which as a parent, you're like, I sent you to school all day and you did nothing.
Right,
Which
right.
is not
Like I'm
true.
surprised. That's not real. I know that's not real.
Not real. I'm with kids at school all day. They do a
Yeah.
lot of things all
Hmm.
day. Um, so as a grown-up around a child, I would learn two or three things about the child's environment at school. And they can be things you don't know and ask about those specifically. Like on the day that they had PE, what did you play in PE today? Who did you sit by at lunch? Where did you play on the playground? And those are some really simple WH questions to ask your child. And you can vary the questions or you can keep them the same, but it helps your child to think about a direct answer and be able to give you an answer. And sometimes that opens the door for them to share more information. Because when at lunch, the child next to them, dropped their whole lunch on the ground or thought it would be funny to steal one of their cookies, they're going to tell you about that when that's a
Hmm.
regular place that you ask about. So that I think is the best thing that you can do being around a child. It's to ask them direct questions about their day and not just how
Mm.
it was.
I'll follow that up with something I've been learning to try to do is to shut up. And so I will find myself asking questions. And then I've been learning that if I shut up and just let them talk, they're going to tell me more. And I will be like, huh, I'm really glad that you told me that. How
Mhm.
did that make you feel? And then I also, again, be more quiet and stop answering the question for them. Like, oh, did that make you feel sad? No, just like, how did that make you feel? And he's like, yeah, that kind of stunk. I'm like, yeah, that would make me feel a certain way too. And so I feel like, as parents, it's that balance, right? Of like asking them those questions. And so that's a really easy one. All parents can take that away. You're asking what WH questions, and then I'm going to add on to that with a then shut up, because they will tell you more and kind of give you an eye into their life if you can just listen. And it's so hard to listen sometimes because I feel like, as a business owner and a mom, there's like all these things going on, right? Even right now, I'm thinking like, okay, I have the Christmas list. I need to order those things. I think I've got all these ideas for the stocking stuffer, so I'm going to put those away. I know I forgot to pay this bill, so make sure you pay that by the end of the day. I know you've got this big meeting coming up, and there's so much going on like up here in the headspace that you can't see. I feel like uh listening and like slowing down long enough to hear them out, I think will help all kids and help them feel heard too.
Mhm. And their stories are still not linear. When they're
Mm,
children, like the stories are so out of order and so
yes.
messy that you do actually have to apply your brain to listen to their
Hmm.
story, to figure out what actually happened. Like yesterday was election day, and my son had to vote on what kind of cookie they wanted in class. But it
So
started,
cool.
it was really fun.
That's
Um,
awesome.
it's really fun. But the story started with, well, I lost. And it was like, you lost? And he's 6. It's like, you lost? What did you lose at? Well, I lost. And I was like, okay, how do I get this information?
Hmm. Hmm.
What are you talking about? Oh, we had to vote yesterday. Oh, you got to vote. That's so cool. What did you vote on? We voted on what kind of cookie, but I voted for chocolate chip, even though I didn't mean to vote for chocolate chip, and Oreo still won. So I was really glad that Oreo won, even though I lost. And we got to and then the teacher actually sent an email explaining what had happened, and it all made sense. But it cracked me up because that's how the story started, and that was what he remembered. And the story was actually a great story because he really did want Oreos. But
Hmm.
learning the process was really cool, and to get to hear from his eyes what he saw and experienced.
Oh, that's awesome. So
Mhm.
parents, be listening and be asking those direct questions and letting them like kind of communicate with you. And that probably helps with their speech and their critical thinking as well and how they build stories. And
Yeah.
so let's pivot back to what it means to be a business owner. And I talk about this and I ask business owners about this all the time. And when you're something else, you're gonna try for things and you're gonna go big or go home,
Mhm.
and you're gonna sometimes fail. And I
Mhm.
don't think that it's not that business owners maybe don't talk about it enough. I just don't think it's something that's highlighted, right? I think on social media, when you see all these business owners and they're like these entrepreneurs and they totally resonate with that word, which I feel like that word is just so weird because I just want to do all the things. I don't know if I'm an entrepreneur because
Mhm.
typically I think my own bias is like, that's a male. And I'm like, no, it's actually a female too. It's a female too. Like, get out of your own way. And so where have you failed? And then what did you learn from that failure?
Mhm. See. So I feel like failing is such a part of life.
Mm,
And it's interesting because it's like I have failed last week, when you do the wrong activity with a student and they
mm.
hate it and the session goes so south. And you're like, well, that was the wrong activity. And either
Hmm.
you pivot in the middle of the session or you don't, and the session isn't recoverable. And what do you do when the student has a really hard day? Um,
Mm,
yeah, I did one actually last week where I pulled all the 6th graders together, and it went very poor. And realizing like, oh, this is why we do smaller groups. And I was trying
yeah.
to do an activity with all of them together, and they literally didn't get along and were just nasty to each other. And it was like, okay, I saw that, and this is why this student doesn't get pulled with this student, and I will never do that
Try this
again.
again.
Yeah. No, so that's one like in session and having to watch that. I mean, and then there have been big fails as a business where I go after a bid, and don't get the bid because we were too high priced or we weren't the right business that they were looking for.
Mm,
Um, I would say those are probably the more painful because you put hours and hours into pursuing a bid and, sharing yourself as a business and sharing the team and being so excited for the potential, to grow, the potential to serve more students,
mm,
and then getting a no back for that is always hard. Um, when I owned the private practice, like there were seasons that therapists would leave, with no no warning. Like I've done this long enough that I know there are warning signs when a therapist is going to leave, and they're very consistent in the field of therapy for most therapists. Like these are the key indicators that
Someone's
something,
going to be leaving.
yeah, someone's going to be leaving, and it's okay. Learning over the years, like it's not a rejection, it's they're moving to a new season, and I have to support and encourage that. And realizing it as I do this longer, like there's shame in leaving a business and there's embarrassment if it's been a good job, but they need something different for their family.
Yeah.
Um, Navigating with therapists, like, no, I applaud you. Like we had a therapist, we were her first job. She stayed with us 5 years. She was phenomenal. And she was so upset to have to give her notice, but her family situation was changing. And it was like, I am so excited for you. And she literally cried in telling me that she was leaving because she's like, I can't believe you're excited. And I'm like, you've been with us 5 years. You are phenomenal at what you do. This does not change my opinion of you as a person, as
Mm,
a therapist, or anything. Um, but that actually really taught me because she was so open, just letting me see how upset she was to be leaving, that she was really fearful that I was going to be upset with her
yeah.
because of that change. So,
There's
so
so
there,
much stigma around leaving a job
right.
too. I mean, it's so hard. I talk to job seekers all the time who, like, they are so ready to try something new, which is what's got them on the phone with me in the first place. But
Right.
having to put in that notice, having
Right.
to make that life change, like people don't, until you're going through it and living it, you don't actually understand how stressful it is on the inside. Like knowing that, like, you have to go have this uncomfortable conversation.
Yes. So that those are probably the hardest, like when therapists leave with no notice and it doesn't
Mm.
make sense, or really not getting a bid that I have pursued. Um, those are probably the biggest. And not getting a bid like does take a while to recover from. I've learned like I just need to give myself some space to process and be okay with that and move
Mm.
forward and say, what can I learn? Because some of them, it's like, oh, I did that wrong in the bid and I need to fix it. I need to pay more attention. The bids, when you're dealing with a governmental agency, can be like 75 pages of how well can you follow directions.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if you miss a direction or don't check the right box, like you miss the bid for the whole thing. So that can be
Wow.
very emotional to miss that because it affects people's jobs. It's like, oh, well, I can't employ you anymore. We don't have that bid anymore. So that's hard.
Yeah, I bet. Well, and it seems like what you've learned in the process is like when you do experience the failures and you do experience the setback, you give yourself some space to digest it. Most of the time, our lives are so busy that people are like, just move on to the next one. Like it wasn't meant for you. And you're like, but that
Oh,
like hurt. Like I need to
yeah.
sit with that for a day. I
Yeah.
think us like learning to be okay with failure and then be like, okay, I'm gonna lick my wounds a minute. I'm gonna learn and now I'm gonna get back up again. I think that is the key to being a successful business owner is being able to get back up. It's hard. It hurts sometimes, especially after you've made an intense mistake.
Mhm.
But I don't think there's any way around it. Like, I don't know if anyone does business without making any mistakes. I
Yeah,
don't see how that happens.
don't think you can. Well, and it's interesting to talk about this out loud. So in 2015, we went for our first big bid. And I know it seems like it's a long time ago, but we went for the first big bid and missed it because of a technicality. And at the time, we were really, really devastated because it was like, we'll be able to grow. We can do all
Yeah.
these things. We can start the conversation. And the way we do it, bids are only every 3 years. So we had to wait 3 years before we could even apply for that same bid again. Um, and that one was really hard to process through, but truthfully, we learned so much from that process and learned how to navigate those in the future and that we needed a month to prepare a bid. Like that's how much time you can't put it together in a matter of hours. Like you
Wow.
need to do it for a month and you need somebody else to read through it and you need to look over all the things. Um, so that one was probably the hardest because after you survive the first one, you're like, oh, okay, I'm still provided for. I'm still okay. We
Yeah.
will move through this. But the first one, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the end.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
And
yeah,
I typically, I don't know about you, but I feel like in business and just in life in general, like I learn things the hard way. And so I'm like, oh,
oh yes,
I do have to get smacked in the face with that before I get it. Okay.
totally.
Oh my goodness. Well, listeners, there's so much here. So you might need to go listen back if you are a speech language therapist and you're looking for a new gig in Northeast Florida, which is not Northeastern Florida, it's Northeast Florida. So if you're looking for a gig, you need to contact us. But if you're want to learn a little bit more about, speech and what it's like to work for a company who really supports and invests in you for the long term, no matter how long you stay with them, it seems like you really walk well with people in business and in your life. And so we can take something from that. And then small business owners, obviously, like we're here for the long haul, right? Like we're small business owners, we've got some grit. We learn from those failures. And I think that you've gotten to get at least a good peek inside of what it's like to have a small business in Northeast Florida. And so it's been wonderful to chat with you, Jessica. I feel like we could go on all day about being a woman in business and what it's like to have these failures and how we learn from them and how we grow. But we'll cut it short for now, and we'll maybe hop on another session. But it's been fun having you on. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciated it.
You got it. All right, listeners, have a great week. Life is better with you in it. So go learn to be with people well.